President Trump used a White House event to launch the Freedom Haulers Initiative, a transportation program aimed at helping veterans obtain commercial driver's licenses and move into trucking jobs. The Department of Transportation and the White House both frame it as a workforce measure, while the Hill treats it as part of the administration's broader veteran employment push. The immediate policy question is how many training slots, employers, and state licensing offices are actually involved, because trucking licenses are issued through practical state and industry steps. For veterans, the difference between a speech and a usable program will be application rules, funding, training locations, and employer commitments. For carriers, it could matter if the department ties the announcement to driver shortages, safety standards, or hiring incentives. The record to watch next is a notice, grant document, carrier partnership list, or state licensing memo with dates and eligibility terms. A useful follow-up should name the offices running the program and explain whether benefits are available now or only planned. Until those details appear, the confirmed story is an announced federal trucking workforce initiative for veterans, with implementation still to prove, with evidence showing whether the announcement changes daily decisions or remains only a political marker for now, with a measurable record explaining who pays, who enforces, who can challenge the decision, and when deadlines arrive. A Senate committee advanced Dr. Erica Schwartz's nomination to lead the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, moving the pick toward the next stage of confirmation. Reuters, CBS News, PBS, and the New York Times all describe the development as a committee action rather than a completed appointment. The practical issue is whether the full Senate schedules a vote, whether senators request more health policy commitments, and how quickly the agency would get confirmed leadership. The CDC post matters because outbreaks, vaccine guidance, disease surveillance, and emergency communication all depend on agency credibility and clear decision authority. Supporters will point to the committee vote as momentum, while opponents or undecided senators can still shape the floor debate. The next record to watch is the Senate calendar. Any written questionnaire responses, committee vote tally, and public statements from senators who can decide the final margin. A meaningful update should show whether the nomination has enough support for confirmation or is entering a longer fight. For now, the sourced record is progress through committee, not final control of the agency, with a measurable record explaining who pays, who enforces, who can challenge the decision, and when deadlines arrive, with a dated filing separating practical change from public positioning and giving affected people something concrete to use. With confirmed records, direct institutional action, visible consequences, and no unsupported leap. Jersey Mike's began public trading with shares falling after the sandwich chain priced its initial public offering at $23. Reuters, CNBC, Bloomberg, and Hindustan Times all report the debut as a market test for a Blackstone-backed restaurant brand entering public ownership. The important fact is not only the first-day drop, it is what the pricing and valuation say about investor appetite for consumer chains. A weak opening can affect how analysts model growth, franchise economics, debt, and future restaurant IPOs. The company now has to prove that store expansion and sales can support the valuation investors were offered. The next checkpoint is the first closing price, underwriter stabilization filings, analyst coverage, and the company's first public earnings guidance. A useful follow-up should separate normal IPO volatility from a deeper repricing of the business. Until more trading and company disclosures arrive, the clean takeaway is that Jersey Mike's reached the public market but met immediate investor resistance. With a dated filing separating practical change from public positioning and giving affected people something concrete to use. With confirmed records, direct institutional action, visible consequences, and no unsupported leap beyond the source trail. With a public document naming dates, offices, operational details, funding, enforcement authority, and practical effects rather than another broad quote. With evidence showing whether the announcement changes daily decisions or remains only a political. Bond investors are questioning Kevin Warsh's credibility as a possible Federal Reserve leader because they are looking for evidence of a firm inflation stance. Reuters, Axios, the Business Times, and the Economic Times all frame the issue through market reaction, not only political speculation about a personnel choice. The key pressure point is whether traders believe a future chair would keep policy tight enough if inflation remains stubborn. That matters because Treasury yields, mortgage rates, corporate borrowing, and dollar expectations can move when investors doubt central bank discipline. Warsh's public comments and any White House signals therefore become market inputs even before a formal nomination exists. The next record to watch is a Fed speech, bond market close, inflation report, or nomination signal that changes expectations around rate policy. A useful update should show whether yields move because of data, because of leadership speculation, or because investors reassess both together. For now, the source story is market skepticism about the policy message attached to Warsh's name. With confirmed records, direct institutional action, visible consequences, and no unsupported leap beyond the source trail. with a public document naming dates, offices, operational details, funding, enforcement authority, and practical effects rather than another broad quote, with evidence showing whether the announcement changes daily decisions or remains only a political marker for now. Immigration lawyers and major outlets report that ICE arrests at airports are expanding beyond the patterns travelers had previously expected. The Washington Post, CBS News, USA Today, and Latin Times describe the story through airport enforcement, TSA collaboration, and warnings from legal advocates. The core question is which travelers are being targeted, what databases or checkpoints are involved, and whether the practice reflects new written guidance. That distinction matters because airport screening, immigration enforcement, and routine travel involve different authorities and different public expectations. A change in practice can affect families, visa holders, asylum applicants, and lawyers trying to prepare clients for travel. The next record to watch is a DHS or ICE memo, airport-specific statement, court filing, or documented case list showing who is subject to arrest and why. A useful update should identify locations, legal status categories, and any challenge from civil liberties groups or local officials. Until then, the sourced record shows expanded airport enforcement concerns, with the exact policy basis still unclear, with a public document naming dates, offices, operational details, funding, enforcement authority, and practical effects rather than another broad quote, with evidence showing whether the announcement changes daily decisions or remains only a political marker for now, with a measurable record explaining who pays, who enforces, who can challenge the decision, and when deadlines arrive. President Trump defended his tariff agenda in Michigan, even as rising costs are worrying some supporters in a state tied closely to manufacturing and autos. PBS, the Herald Palladium, Eagle Tribune, and the Daily Gazette report the story as a Michigan pocketbook and trade policy test rather than a campaign soundbite alone. The immediate issue is whether tariffs are raising costs for businesses and households faster than the administration can show offsetting benefits. Michigan matters because factories, suppliers, farmers, retailers, and consumers can all feel tariff effects through prices and demand. Support from voters who like the president can still weaken if they see higher costs without visible gains. The next record to watch is customs guidance, company pricing notices, auto supplier statements, inflation data, or a trade negotiation document tied to affected goods. A useful follow-up should name which products face higher costs and whether any exemptions or deals reduce the burden. For now, the confirmed story is a political defense of tariffs running into measurable cost anxiety among some allies, with evidence showing whether the announcement changes daily decisions or remains only a political marker for now, with a measurable record explaining who pays, who enforces, who can challenge the decision, and when deadlines arrive, with a dated filing separating practical change from public positioning and giving affected people something concrete to use. Russian strikes across Ukraine killed civilians while a missile landing in Poland led NATO to scramble aircraft, raising the regional security stakes around the war. NBC News, The Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and other reporting connect battlefield damage with alliance readiness near NATO territory. The important distinction is whether the Polish incident is treated as spillover, a navigational error, or evidence of a wider risk to alliance airspace. Ukraine's casualty count and infrastructure damage matter on their own, while the NATO response matters because it tests escalation procedures. Governments will be careful about wording because a confirmed cross-border threat can trigger diplomatic and military consequences. The next record to watch is a Polish government statement, NATO Air Command update, Ukrainian casualty revision, or satellite and field report on the strike sites. A useful follow-up should name the missile path, impact location, and whether Allied forces changed posture. Until that evidence appears, the sourced record shows deadly attacks in Ukraine and a serious but still developing NATO-adjacent alert, with a measurable record explaining who pays, who enforces, who can challenge the decision, and when deadlines arrive, with a dated filing separating practical change from public positioning and giving affected people something concrete to use, with confirmed records, direct institutional action, visible consequences, and no unsupported leap beyond the source trail. President Trump says an agreement has been reached for Hamas disarmament, but reporting from Reuters, The Guardian, Axios, and The Hill shows Israeli support and implementation remain uncertain. The practical question is whether this is a negotiated framework, a political claim, or a plan with enforceable steps accepted by the parties who would have to carry it out. Disarmament in Gaza would require verification, security arrangements, reconstruction terms, and decisions by Israeli leaders, Hamas, mediators, and regional governments. That is why the story cannot rest on one announcement, even if the claim is large. The next record to watch is an Israeli cabinet statement, mediator text, Hamas response, ceasefire mechanism, or published timetable naming who verifies weapons transfers. A useful update should show whether the agreement has signatures, conditions, enforcement powers, and public backing from the governments involved. If those records do not appear, the story remains an asserted breakthrough with major unresolved details. For now, the source takeaway is a claim of progress paired with visible uncertainty over support and execution, with a dated filing separating practical change from public positioning and giving affected people something concrete to use. With confirmed records, direct institutional action, visible consequences, and no unsupported leap beyond the source trail. With a public document naming dates, offices, operational details, funding, enforcement authority. And practical effects rather than another broad. Middle East coverage is tracking a widening confrontation involving Iran, Israel, the United States, and regional actors as the conflict enters another dangerous phase. CBS News, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, and CNN describe strikes, diplomacy, and warnings that the situation could expand rather than settle quickly. The central question is which attacks are confirmed, which governments acknowledge responsibility, and whether civilian infrastructure or shipping routes face new risk. That matters because oil markets, air travel, military deployments, and diplomacy can all react before a formal ceasefire or escalation decision is announced. Saudi and Israeli leaders are also trying to shape Washington's choices, making the political track as important as the battlefield reports. The next record to watch is a military statement, verified field report, shipping advisory, oil market close, or diplomatic readout from the governments involved. A useful follow-up should name targets, casualties, response plans, and any channel for de-escalation. Until then, the sourced record shows a volatile regional crisis with competing military and diplomatic signals. With confirmed records, direct institutional action, visible consequences, and no unsupported leap beyond the source trail. With a public document naming dates, offices, operational details, funding, enforcement authority, and practical effects rather than another broad quote. With evidence showing whether the announcement changes daily decisions or remains only a political marker for now.